Tonight from Baghdad, Iraq. A CBS News exclusive, one-on-one with Saddam Hussein. The Iraqi president challenges President Bush to a worldwide radio and television satellite debate. And he indicates he will not comply with United Nations orders to destroy his Al-Samud missiles.
And here in New York at UN headquarters, the U.S., Britain, and Spain introduce a war resolution saying Saddam has missed his final chance to disarm peacefully. And Turkey takes another step toward allowing U.S. ground troops to use Turkish bases to attack Iraq.
This is the CBS Evening News, with Dan Rather reporting tonight from Baghdad and John Roberts from New York.
Good evening. There are only 2 men in the world now that can prevent a new U.S.-led war with Iraq. And tonight, a rainy night in Baghdad, with thunder and lightning about, I sat down with one of them, the president of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. In his first interview with an American journalist in about a decade, he talked for some 3 hours about the looming war and about what he described as his efforts to head it off. Now, because of the length of the interview, the complications of double translations, and the time it will take for CBS News to get a full and accurate transcript, I can only bring you the headlines from 2 of the stories right now. We begin with Saddam Hussein's response to the UN demand that he destroy some prohibited missiles. The now infamous Al-Samud 2 missile is at the heart of this week's dispute with the UN inspectors. The Iraqis insist it does not violate the range limits placed on Iraq by UN resolutions. President Hussein told me tonight that, quote, Iraq is allowed to prepare proper missiles, and we are committed to that. But is the Al-Samud proper? President Hussein's response, we do not have missiles that go beyond the prescribed range. He thereby strongly indicated Iraq will resist efforts to begin the destruction of the missiles as demanded by inspectors. On another front, President Hussein had a surprising proposal for President Bush. He is challenging the President of the United States to join him in a live radio and television satellite link-up and debate the need for war before the entire world. I am ready, said the Iraqi president, to conduct a direct dialogue, a debate with your president. I will say what I want, and he will say what he wants. Continuing to quote, this will be an opportunity for him. If he's committed to war, this will be an opportunity to convince the world. President Hussein and all Iraqi officials have repeatedly noted the size and strength of the anti-war demonstrations that occurred 10 days ago. They are certain they have an audience for this idea. I asked Saddam Hussein if he was joking about such a proposal. This is something proposed in earnest, he said, out of my respect for the people of the United States and my respect for the people of Iraq and the people of the world. I call for this because war is not a joke. As leaders, said the Iraqi president to his American counterpart, why don't we use this opportunity? As I said, we spent about 3 hours with Saddam Hussein in the old Baghdad palace. He had a lot to say to the American people, to President George Bush, about Osama bin Laden, about 9/11, about the dangers empires have historically faced in the Middle East, about whether he would set fire to his oil fields in case of attack, and whether under any circumstances he would consider going into exile. We'll have some of that tomorrow on the CBS Evening News, tomorrow morning on the early show, and the main part of the Saddam Hussein interview on 60 Minutes 2, Wednesday night at 9, 8 Central.
The fact that he was willing to sit down with you, did that give you a sense that Saddam Hussein really believes that it's down to crunch time now?
Yes, I think he knows that. In fact, he indicated it very clearly. You know, he's a tall man. He's about 6'2", 6'2 and a half. He walked a little stiffly. I think that may be because of these reports he had a bad back. But he was very calm, at least outwardly, unhurried, as evidenced by the amount of time he spent with us. And I think in direct answer to your question, he knows that the time for the invasion is very near. He takes seriously what President Bush has been saying, and he made it clear in the interview that he's prepared as he can get. He thinks the Iraqi people are prepared as they can get, and he basically laid out a situation where he thinks that Iraq will have to absorb a tremendous first and maybe second punch from the United States and its allies, but he left no doubt that he believes that Iraq can and will absorb that punch, and if the Americans and their allies come, that they in the end will be defeated. It's his view, John, by the way, and he repeated in the interview, that he did not lose the Gulf War in 1990-91.
So is that an indication, Dan, that Saddam does believe that war is inevitable?
Well, he didn't use the word inevitable, but by both word and deed in the interview, it's very clear that he does expect war. He's hoping somehow, some way that it doesn't happen, but he certainly expects it, and I think it's fair to say he expects it very soon, unless something dramatic changes. He did indicate that any dramatic changes be coming from his end, which means that if there are to be any war-avoiding dramatic changes, they'll have to come from what he'd call the other side.
He has to be aware of the American plan to come in there and to either kill or capture him as swiftly as possible. Is he willing to pay that price? Or you mentioned the word exile a couple of minutes ago. Is there any indication that he's willing to even consider that?
I will say that he strongly indicated that both he and the Iraqi people will be here when the Americans and their allies come, if indeed they come.
What about this order, Dan, from the United Nations to destroy the Al-Samud missiles, which UNMOVIC, the inspection regime, says are proscribed missiles? Does Saddam see this as a make-or-break issue, or does he say, hey, these are only going 25 miles further than they're allowed to go? That's not a very big deal to hang your hat on if you want to go to war.
No, he was very clear about that. He says that all the missiles he has, including the advanced Al-Samud missiles, are within the guidelines of the United Nations. He doesn't indicate that that they go 25 miles farther than they're supposed to go. It's his contention, and he's sticking with it, that he's not going to destroy those missiles, not even going to promise to destroy them, because they are within the UN guidelines.
Dan, it sounds like an absolutely fascinating day. Congratulations on your interview.
Thank you, John.
And Dan, the White House today flat out rejected Saddam's debate proposal, saying the issue is about disarmament, not debate. And at the United Nations, the U.S. and two of its European allies offered the Security Council a new resolution intended to set the stage for military action against Iraq. Bill Plant has more on that story.
The White House dismissed the offer of a debate out of hand. White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer tells CBS News it would be better for the world if Saddam Hussein would disarm.
This is not serious. There's no debating the world's demand that Saddam Hussein disarm. That's what's so troubling about this. He continues to be in defiance. He won't acknowledge the very weapons that the world knows he has.
At the United Nations today, the diplomatic press continued. The U.S., Britain, and Spain gave the Security Council the text of a new resolution which could lead to war, though it never mentions the word. The one-page draft recalls that the most recent Council resolution, passed last November, offered Iraq a final opportunity to comply with many previous UN disarmament demands. It warned that Iraq will face serious consequences for continued violations. The proposed text goes on to say that Iraq has not cooperated and asks the Council to decide that Iraq has failed to take the final opportunity given it in last November's resolution. At the same time, France, Germany, and Russia, supported by China, circulated an alternative plan, which calls for continued inspections which would stretch out over months. But the U.S. and Britain have made it clear they have no patience for an extended timetable. With Chief Weapons Inspector Hans Blix due to deliver a written report on March 1st and then appear before the Council on March 7th, they want a vote the following week. And shortly after the vote, whether it's yes or no, comes the Bush administration's final deadline. National Security Advisor Rice says that there will be an all-out effort to get the second resolution, but mainly because it's important for the allies. The U.S., she says, will act on its own if the Council fails to do so. As things now stand, it will take a lot of convincing to get 9 votes in the Security Council with no vetoes from France, Russia, or China. Bill Plant, CBS News, the White House.
UN weapons inspectors here in Iraq today visited factories that build engines and guidance systems for missiles the United Nations has ordered destroyed. Missiles Saddam Hussein told me tonight he intends to keep. CBS News correspondent Mark Phillips has more about this story.
Even as Saddam was indicating he would not destroy his al-Samud missile arsenal, the man charged with dealing with the UN on Iraq's illegal arms seemed to be stalling for time.
It is being studied very carefully, and the channels are still open between us, and we will come up with a decision quite soon.
The Iraqis have insisted all along that the al-Samud 2 missile, which they test-fired again this weekend, would not violate the UN-imposed range restriction of 93 miles once it was in operational mode and loaded down with its guidance system and warhead. They want technical talks with the UN about it, they say. The UN isn't interested in talking.
Well, we have set the date for the commencement of the destruction of these missiles, and we expect that to be respected.
The date is March 1st, this Saturday. The UN says it's only willing to discuss where the destruction process begins and at what pace it proceeds. There are an estimated 100 to 120 al-Samuds. The inspectors have been cataloging not only the missiles themselves, but their parts, the engines which have been imported to power them, the machinery used to build them, and the plans and software used to develop them. All must go. Until now, the Iraqis have argued that no evidence has been produced that they are in violation of UN resolutions. Defying the al-Samud destruction order would be that obvious violation. Giving up the al-Samud might score diplomatic points for Saddam, but he may have now concluded that he needs the missile now more as a weapon. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Baghdad.
Turkey's cabinet today approved letting U.S. ground forces use Turkish bases for a war with Iraq. But the final decision is still up to the Turkish parliament. If it says yes, some 40,000 U.S. troops will deploy to bases in eastern Turkey in striking distance of Iraq's northern border. It is not a done deal, as CBS's Richard Roth reports from Ankara.
More Americans rolled into a Turkish port today, but only to help prepare military bases here for a deployment Turkey still hasn't approved for a war it still doesn't want.
Saddam is threat for Americans. He is not threat for us. He would not have the courage of being threat for us.
The Pentagon's plan would make this trickle a torrent of 40,000 combat troops heading through Turkey for northern Iraq. Washington's promised $16 billion in cash and loans if Turkey cooperates. But Prime Minister Gül's own cabinet is divided and said so today, handing the decision to Parliament, where there's almost no appetite for war.
The best friends of America are not the rubber stamps who say always yes to every proposal coming from the American administration.
Turkey claims it learned a hard lesson the last time America went to war in the Gulf, that it was promised billions to compensate for its costs, yet much of the aid for refugees and lost trade was never delivered. This time, Turkey wants it all in writing, including military guarantees on the future of northern Iraq. Turkey, which already has troops there, fears that if Saddam is pushed out, ethnic Kurds will try to form their own state, threatening Turkey's authority and its borders. Richard Roth, CBS News, Ankara.
I'll be reporting again tomorrow from here in the Middle East, and we'll have more of CBS's new exclusive interview with Saddam Hussein. Dan Rather, reporting tonight from Baghdad. Now, let's go back to John Roberts in New York. John?
Dan, thanks very much. And coming up next on tonight's CBS Evening News, the deadly nightclub fire in Rhode Island. More finger-pointing tonight. More questions about who is to blame. Investigators in Rhode Island say they have more questions before they can determine blame for the horrendous nightclub fire last Thursday night that killed nearly 100 people. But they're having trouble gaining access to two key people they want to question. Lee Cowan is on the scene in West Warwick and has the latest on the investigation.
The ashes of the station nightclub have yielded some answers to a grieving community, but investigators say the two brothers who owned the club have not been as forthcoming.
Give me a minute!
The single-story wooden building was well over its occupancy limit when a band's pyrotechnic display caught the ceiling on fire. The inferno killed 97 people. The nightmare caught on tape by CBS's WPRI, the station who had just hired one of the club's owners as a reporter.
It is very difficult to express what I experienced at the club that evening. Trying to get people out safely. Please know I tried.
WPRI assigned Jeff Dedarian to do a story on building safety, and he decided to shoot his own club as an example. But in a statement, WPRI insisted there was no plan to publicize or promote the station nightclub in any way. Still, Rhode Island's Attorney General says he wants more answers, but so far, the owners have refused.
They have not responded to our request to answer questions. They don't, nor does anybody else have to, but I think we're all looking for answers here.
Great White, the band who played that night, says it got permission from the club to ignite the fireworks. The club's owner says that's not true, but it wasn't a first.
Every time we ever played anyway, we used it, unless the club would tell us no, but at the station we used it every time but once.
This video shows the band called Love and Cry, using fireworks at the station almost identical to the ones that caused the fire.
They had ample opportunity to tell us, hey, knock it off.
I'm angry, I'm numb, I keep thinking he's going to come back. They made a mistake, but it's not going to happen.
For the family of Robert Reisner, one of the first to be identified, the nightclub simply has no excuse.
He says, oh, I didn't know about this, I didn't know about that. But you know what? You ask me, it's a crock. What are you going to say now? My brother's dead. You know, that's it.
Late tonight, those owners released yet another written statement saying they understand the importance and the severity of the criminal investigation and now say they are arranging to share more information with law enforcement officials soon. John.
Lee Cowan reporting live for us tonight from Rhode Island. Lee, thanks. On the CBS Market Watch tonight, have gasoline prices topped out? An Energy Department report out today finds that after rising steadily for weeks, the price held steady in the past week at a nationwide average $1.66 a gallon. And after 2 winning weeks, stock prices closed sharply lower today on new worries about war. The Dow posted a triple-digit loss. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, scientists say it's the key to battling the AIDS epidemic. The first vaccine designed to prevent HIV infection is tested in humans. The results next. Most public health experts now agree an AIDS vaccine will have to play an essential role in preventing the spread of the disease. Now researchers are out with what they've learned about what's being considered one of the most promising vaccines. Elizabeth Caledon has the findings tonight on the Health Watch.
It was the first AIDS vaccine ever tested in human clinical trials, and hopes were high. But the long-awaited results show it does not work.
Of course I'm disappointed, but having worked in AIDS this long, I'm accustomed to being disappointed.
From the start, VaxGen, the biotech firm making the vaccine, was hoping its product could prevent 30% of HIV infections. But in more than 5,400 volunteers tested, the vaccine reduced the infection rate by just 3.8%. Results were not all dismal, though. In an unexpected twist, the small group of African American and Asian volunteers tested had a 67% lower rate of infection than those given a placebo. The company jumped on this glimmer of hope as a sign the vaccine may not be a total loss.
Non-Caucasian populations that received the vaccine actually responded to the vaccine and better and got a higher immune response.
The data are being furiously debated in the highly political AIDS world. Greg Gonsalves of the Gay Men's Health Crisis says the company is trying to put a positive spin on negative results.
They can give false hopes to African Americans and Asians in the United States that somehow there's a new vaccine on the horizon.
Others are taking a wait-and-see approach to the results in ethnic groups.
It's a small subgroup. We don't know what to make of it.
But Tom Schroeder, one of the volunteers who participated after his partner died of AIDS, feels all is not lost.
As long as it's helped someone, then absolutely, I'm thrilled that I've been a part of it.
VaxGen says it needs much more time to fully analyze its data before it can even begin to understand what such divided results will mean to the population at large, a population still in desperate need of an AIDS vaccine. Elizabeth Caledon, CBS News, New York.
On the CBS Weather Watch, and now another powerful winter storm in parts of the southern plains and the Midwest. They're cleaning up yet again after the latest storm to dump deep snow as much as 2 feet in some places. Before it was over, there were hundreds of traffic accidents. The storm then headed east, reaching parts of Pennsylvania this morning. I'll be back with more of tonight's CBS Evening News in just a moment. We want to take one final look now at our top story of the day. What Saddam Hussein told Dan Rather in an exclusive interview tonight in Baghdad. The Iraqi president denied that his Al-Samud 2 missiles violate UN range restrictions, and he indicated he will not destroy those missiles. Saddam also proposed that President Bush join him in a televised debate over the need for war, a proposal that the White House flatly rejected. You can see videotape excerpts of this exclusive interview with Saddam Hussein tomorrow morning on the CBS Early Show, on the CBS Evening News tomorrow night, and then on a special edition of 60 Minutes 2 Wednesday night at 9, 8 Central. And that's the CBS Evening News for this Monday. For Dan Rather in Baghdad, I'm John Roberts in New York. Thanks for choosing CBS News. Have a good night.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com. AOL keyword CBS News.
Saddam Hussein talks with Dan Rather, a CBS News exclusive. Tomorrow, experience CBS News.